Welcome. I'm Jonathan Hanson, Chief Creative Officer at Unconquered, and this is Conquer the Noise, a podcast dedicated to telling stories of outstanding ideas and people who have found their way amongst the chatter. I will be the host of our first series, Cultivating Purpose and Passion in Business, where we talk with business leaders about how they've combined their love of the environment with business to create actionable ways of giving back, while creating brands that have cultural impact. During our time together, we will discuss ways brands and businesses can better connect with their environment and community, while learning how they can bring brand values to the forefront to help them differentiate themselves in a crowded marketplace. If you're an entrepreneur, care about the environment, and want to hear inspiring stories, this podcast is for you. Today, we are speaking with Liz Miller, Senior Marketing Manager at Divine Chocolate, who believes in the power of chocolate to bring people together. Liz, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I've been hearing such great things about you from Lucy, who I know you've had an ongoing conversation with. And she's had wonderful things to say about you. So we're really excited to have you on. And she recently she told me that you just had a baby.
Yes, my baby actually just turned 1. So we celebrated her birthday on Sunday. Thank you.
And how has the work-life balance been going? I'm sure you're working from home like everyone else is right now.
Yeah, so I got back from maternity leave. Fortunately, Divine gives a really great maternity leave. I had 12 weeks and then added on a few weeks of vacation time that I had accrued. So I got back from maternity leave in October. So sort of like being back is in 2 parts. You have pre-pandemic and then during pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think across the board, it's definitely challenging just from a personal perspective to figure out all of the logistics and what's needed to stay happy and well.
Yeah.
Especially during the last couple of months, my husband and I have been co-working at home and also doing co-childcare as our daycare has been closed. So it's been hard. It's been really hard. We're just working. I mean, my daughter wakes up at 5 a.m. and then we're just trying to manage our schedules together and giving each other the right amount of time necessary to do our work and enjoy time with our daughter also. So we're also working a lot of times after she goes to sleep.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the challenges as more and more people work from home is that separation of if you will, church and state of work life is no longer there. So, how can you create those boundaries? Not everyone has an extra room in their house so they can create an office and just shut the door. And I think it's really putting values in and people's belief systems in check right now, or at least in a state of questioning. I think when we start talking about this new normal and these different ideas around culture change, I think that's one of the big ones we're facing. So how are you, I guess, dealing with a lot of that? Are you trying to make time for family outside of that, or have you started to question some of the values and systems you have in place in your own life?
Well, I think first of all, I feel pretty grateful that I have the type of work relationships that I do, and I work in a very supportive environment. So, it's not perfect, but I think more organizations should just trust their employees. And I feel like that's one of the things that works really well with me and my team is there's a very great environment of trust. And, I trust my direct reports, my supervisor trusts me, and it really enables me to flourish way more than if I was constantly being checked in on or, asked to turn in my timesheet, and I know that some types of work environments operate very differently. Like a friend of mine who's a lawyer, you have to submit your timesheets. It's just not negotiable. But I do believe that still instilling that trust is the only way that businesses can be sustainable and really get the value out of their employees, because every employee knows when they are not trusted. It's very evident.
It is. And I think it's one of those ways to just squash morale and kill your team's desire to want to work and and produce. So I know your daughter's 1 year old, so she's not quite all there, but your life seems to be really you really seem to structure your life on your values, right? Like your career decisions, your mentorship decisions, um, all the way from in college. From what I've been reading a bit about you, you really are some of the few that I think walk the walk. They don't just talk it. So your daughter is 1 year old. How are you starting? Are you starting to like start with her early and start really instilling some of these values that you've developed over the course of your life now, and how, if so, how are you doing that?
Yeah, I am. And, the way I approach parenthood is that even though she's a baby, I don't think of her as like a blank slate and that I have to just ascribe my every thought and whim onto her. I believe that she's a whole person on her own and she will rise and become her own. But I do really, really believe in leading by example. And so even if it's not an explicit, this is what you do in this situation and this is what you do in a different situation, I just start doing it and hope that my consistency in my actions, whether it's always, always saying thank you to the recycling collectors when they come past us on the street, or sharing some divine chocolate with our neighbors. I'd like to bring her along with me. Or, when we're talking on the phone, just really, really showing her that people matter. I think that's the one thing that I
Mm-hmm.
really want her to understand is we all have a million other things going on in life, and our work is important to us and our hobbies are important and give us relaxation. But really at the end of the day, it's the people that we care about and the people that we love. And I try to make time for that. And I think, speaking to, work-life balance, one of the hardest things that I've experienced in the last few months is not being able to be with my families with our families who live in other states. And we've had to cancel a couple of trips to, yeah, it's just been really hard to not see them. But I do try to, the relationships is what I hope that she picks up, caring about people.
Yeah, and I think that's what really has come through in some of the work you've done over the past years. And one of the things that I was curious about is I was wondering if this started long before you even with your own parents, and is this something that has always social justice always been important, just a family value and something that's carried along, and they've helped sort of nudge you along?
Yes, definitely. My parents are retired Methodist ministers, and so they were church leaders in their community, in different communities,
Mm-hmm.
their whole lives. And so I grew up um, around lots of people who really made it their mission to serve others. And my own belief sets have maybe changed in terms of religion over the years, but I still believe that it is that core central component of care for others, think about the underserved, think about people in need. That's been there since I can first remember.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents often recall this story about when I'd be wandering the halls of their churches when they were having meetings or um, getting together and I would go around and I would write on all of the bulletin boards things like help the poor people or please bring food or
Mm-hmm.
just little messages of encouragement to remind others that, hey, I'm a 5-year-old, but I still care and you can too.
Yeah. And I think it's a great reality check when you do see people as young as 5 or even younger voicing these, because it does sort of boil it down to like these are like really simple human truths that um, they don't take $1 million. They don't take, um, you know, X amount of hours of volunteer work. These are just small actions that I think we can, remind ourselves with on a daily basis. Um, and so your experience with divine is, a company that sources chocolate from Ghana, or cacao or cocoa.
We say cocoa, but you can say the.
Okay, okay. Um, before even starting with Divine, you had some experience in Ghana. Did that shape your desire to want to work in that country specifically? Did that sort of uh, embed like a desire to go back and work there, or I'd love to hear about that experience.
I was very interested in international relations and international politics in undergrad. So I was a poli-sci major. And when the opportunity came up to do some sort of study abroad program, a lot of my friends were going to Europe, but I fortunately had been to Europe with my family. But so I wanted to do something that was different. I wanted to see something that was not the same as or similar to what I was used to in the US. So I chose to go to Ghana because I believed it would offer me something new and interesting to learn about. So that was my last 6 credit hours of college. That was what I was doing. And it's the link between Divine and that experience is almost like it wasn't very intentional, but it just so happened to boost me in the Divine direction.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the main things I learned from going to Ghana is, even though I expected it to be so radically different, and in some ways it was, I had never seen that level of poverty before, and that was very moving to me. But I think the other thing I learned was we are all human beings, and when you're living in the United States and you're trying to think about how do people in Ghana live their lives, sometimes there are very different parts of how they live, but they also, they also have some of the same things. Like the host family that I was staying with, the 13-year-old daughter, she had braces and she was just in agony about how her braces were hurting, and
Mm-hmm.
she was a little self-conscious about them. And I remember feeling those exact same things when I was a 13-year-old with braces.
Mm-hmm.
So, there were a lot of things that were different, but it just made me realize that we weren't so far removed from each other. And I think that the personalization of understanding how relationships work, that is what really came to the surface for me.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar experience traveling. I love to travel. Europe has been sort of like the last part of my travels as of recent, because historically it was never as interesting to me. I always felt somewhat familiar, just being of European descent, and Western culture. Though it's culturally different, there are still some things that are very similar to European life. And so I spent a lot of time traveling through Asia, through Northeast Africa. And I think, when you say that travel really puts things in perspective, I think you hit it right on the head when you're saying that you really realize that regardless of how scary and different another country may appear to be when you get there, and you get through those initial parts of just either culture shock or reservation of being in a new place, I think you really realize that we are all the same. We all experience the same thing, or as far as the same emotions. And I think that's like one of the beauty of like being able to connect with people in anywhere. It's just understanding that like the simple human truths always kind of play out. So like when I was reading through your biography a bit, I'm going to read just a sentence here because I found it really striking, and I think it was really telling of how you view yourself, and I kind of want to use that to lead into some of the other things we're going to be speaking about today. But in your bio, it says, "I'm an advocate, marketer, and communications professional with 10 years of experience across the business and nonprofit sectors." There's a lot in that one sentence, and I think the one that sticks out for me most is the word advocate. It's used first, so obviously it's something that you really are holding on to as a part of your identity. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
And
I would say that.
okay,
True.
okay. And I would love for you to hear, like, what does advocacy mean for you then? You've had these really interesting trips around the world. You've learned and connect with people from all different cultures. You've experienced poverty. You're right. When you go to parts of other countries, you see poverty that you just don't see in the United States, level of poverty. So, being an advocate, is that just simply donating money? Or what does that mean to you?
The term advocate for me is more of creating a platform for others to thrive or share their stories or their voices. It also means to me being a bridge between understanding and lack of understanding and understanding. It also means recognizing that there is a lot of inequality in the world, and in a position like mine where I'm a pretty well-off white woman, I have the opportunity to shed light onto situations that deserve it and that could be more just or more fair. So I sort of see it as a link between my position and giving other people something better. And really, for me, trying to step back from, it's not all about me per se. It's more about what can I do to elevate issues or elevate causes. So, for example, one of the best things that I have done at Divine Chocolate, one of my favorite experiences, was in 2017. We hosted one of the cocoa farmers from Ghana here in DC, and she was coming as a representative of the cooperative. And I don't think I could be more literal than giving a woman a voice or an opportunity to share her voice as setting up 25 events in DC and Austin, Texas, for her to share her story to other people. And it was amazing. I also got the chance to just walk around DC with her and hear about her life and hear about what it's like every single day to be a cocoa farmer. And so what it really came down to for me was the ability to step back and I was so motivated to make everything a success, not because I wanted the glory, but because I wanted her to feel like she could really have an impact by sharing her story. And she could feel that value reflected back toward her also. Because if it weren't, my whole premise in advocacy is, there are a lot of people who contribute so much value to the things that we enjoy every single day, but it's taken for granted. And so that's one of the things at Divine that I care so deeply about. And the reason why I work for a company like Divine is because in my role, I can advocate for cocoa farmers and the value that they produce for others. And it's really important that they receive back, whether an income or recognition or acknowledgement, some of that value too.
And I think that's a good segue into Divine a bit, because you hit it on the head already with a few things as far as giving back, supporting those who are creating something that's used every day and could easily be taken advantage of, because it's in another country. You don't read about cocoa farmers. You don't really read about farmers often in general. So tell us a little bit about Divine and what makes the business so special.
Divine was started by a group of cocoa farmers over 20 years ago when they realized that they needed to find a way to earn more and they deserved better. Historically, and I won't get into all of the historical details of it. It's a lot. You can read a book about it. But the cocoa market just was not providing any significant value for farmers. Historically, they are earning about $1 a day for the production of the cocoa. And this is presently a $100 billion industry, the chocolate industry, $100 billion. And if you compare and contrast those two numbers, you see an enormous difference. So over 20 years ago, a group of farmers said we should earn more. They realized that the value of their contribution was not just in selling the cocoa itself, but also in the actual product, the chocolate bar itself. So they voted to start a chocolate company, and they got a lot of backing from NGOs. So UK NGOs, our company started in the UK, and other organizations who cared about fair trade. And that was the beginning. And they have co-ownership of our company, and they also have seats on our board of directors. And leadership over the years have traveled back to Ghana, basically to report on our business to them. We see all of the employees at Divine see ourselves as working for the farmers. They don't work for us. We work for them. And it's our role to market and sell and distribute a product that they make possible. So through the fair trade system, through co-ownership, and through our business model as a whole, we see it as critical to elevating them in the value chain and giving them more for what they produce.
And when you say they own it, it's or shares of it, it's not like they own 5%. We're talking about 44% of the company. Yeah, that's pretty significant. And on top of that, you have some give back efforts, right? 1% for the planet, and then you also do a 2%.
We give back 2% of our annual revenue into what we call a producer support and development fund, which goes to, it can vary by year what types of projects it supports, but it's really to boost up and elevate the infrastructure of the cooperatives, and sometimes it gives us an opportunity to work with new farmers in other places. For example, we started working with a new fair trade cooperative in Sao Tome, an island off the west coast of Africa, and just a few years ago to start a new line of chocolate.
And so I think there was a correction. I didn't mean 1% for the planet, I meant a B Corp. So correct there. You guys are a B Corp, correct? Yeah. Okay. And I know not all of our listeners may know what a B Corp is. So could you just maybe talk through what that is?
Sure. Certified B corporations are certified by a nonprofit organization called B Lab. And so what that means, B Lab is a third party which has an assessment, a very rigorous assessment that they use to understand not just the, is this organization making money, but to really understand and measure the social and environmental impact of a company. So companies and organizations that are B Corp certified undergo this assessment. I think it's every 2 years, and they're provided a score. And that score is sort of relative to a threshold that you need to meet in order to become a certified B Corp. And really, it's just a way for, there's a lot of marketing out there that's, I'm a marketer, I know, but there's a lot of marketing out there that is very ethically, sits in this ethical space, but it's sometimes hard for consumers to understand the truth of some of that marketing. So when you're in the B Corp system, it sort of gives you a stamp from somebody else who's looking at you and saying, yes, you're actually doing what you say you're doing, and it's actually having a real impact.
So I know one of the goals of Divine is to help with women empowerment and work. Can you talk to me a bit about like how many farmers we're seeing, like a percentage of them are women? And I was reading recently about the how economic empowerment leads to women's rights in some ways, and instead of meeting GDP quotas or simply because we need more people in the workforce, it's actually a way to gain more rights. I would love to hear how that's been really a driver in Divine and nurturing the community there.
When the cooperative that co-owns Divine, Coapa Cocoa, was started, it was the co-op itself that prioritized gender equality as a part of anything that it did. So I like that, because rather than a Western company saying, you all need to focus on this, it was actually the farmers themselves who said, we need to focus on this because we realize how important it is to our success. And so Divine has been able to shepherd that along the way within our marketing and sales efforts too, to just try and raise awareness about how important it is to value women and to give them not just a role in anything that has been set up, but also give them opportunities to be leaders and make decisions and really contribute. The makeup of QAPA is about 30% women.
Mhm.
And I think sort of a little bit higher than the overall average of women farmers being about 25% across all cocoa growing regions. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the stories that I've heard from farmers in QAPA are from women, and they've said, we wanted to be members of QAPA because we heard it was good for women. So for example, I mentioned before the PS&D fund we support. One of the projects that supports is women's literacy programs. So it helps women learn how to read. I mean, women and men can attend, but it's really focused in on supporting women because the illiteracy rate in Ghana was so high for women. It's about 87%. And so that was recognized as being a huge opportunity to enable women to participate more fully and
Mhm.
be actual representatives in their communities of other women, and really advocating for what women need in order to thrive. So, when you have only one group of people making decisions for another group of people, it's just impossible to get it all right. So as soon
Mhm.
as you have more, this is sort of the basis of democracy, right? Is when you have
Mhm.
representation that matches the people, then you're able to more fully move forward on some of the things that they need and want to thrive.
Mhm. So, how are you seeing, I guess, poverty and gender interrelated? 'Cause, you're speaking to 80% of women in Ghana of having low literacy rates. There's got to be a correlation there, especially with upward mobility. How are you seeing this play out?
Um, I think in general, the way that you you have to start off pretty small at the sort of community level, but as soon as there are more opportunities for women to participate in whatever is happening, then they are able to earn more income. And for another one of the ways that Divine has supported women is alternative income generating programs. So
Hmm.
like I said, cocoa farming is not very lucrative, so they need other ways to make and earn their incomes. Um, so by providing a way for them to um, earn money and uh, you know work with other women, that it's small, but you have to start small. That's just another way for them to lift themselves out of a situation that out of poverty. And yeah, I think they have to, it has to be, the way that that's only going to be sustainable is if it's self-determined. I mean, it's not about charity, it's about finding ways for them to make it on their own, because that's the only way it's going to last.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And your interest in working with women and women's rights and empowerment started out before Divine, working with a shelter for women who experienced domestic violence.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, well, I would love to hear about what you were doing there and how those lessons have carried over into the work you're doing at Divine.
Yeah, um, that was like 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. Um, I I started off just really interested in supporting the organization, the domestic violence shelter, by being a hotline volunteer, which meant I would take calls from women experiencing domestic violence or looking for resources in the community to help themselves in that situation. But what I realized is that it just sort of seemed to be very one-sided in terms of community. And so what I was really trying to figure out was, how can I connect the community back to those women in a way that the women would feel supported. So I
Mm-hmm.
I created this program called the Hope Note Project, where
Mm-hmm.
I asked members of the community to write and create these various what I called hope notes, and then
Mm-hmm.
I would bring them to the shelter because the shelter was in a secure location. I would bring them to the shelter myself, and they would be included in every woman's sort of the packet of things that they got when they arrived at the shelter. So rather than the women just coming to the shelter and being like, okay, I'm doing this on my own and I have to figure everything out myself, and I don't know, it was a way for them to realize that even if they couldn't directly connect with people around them, talk about their situation, that people cared and people wanted to show them support. So that was one of the ways I tried to make it a two-way street rather than just women coming in and trying to figure it out themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer to your question is about how that sort of translated is the idea that sometimes women are placed in situations where they lose their power. And I think that power is really important for understanding how you can move forward in the world. And power can be interpreted, of course, in very many ways, but when you feel like you can make choices yourself and you feel supported in those choices, you can go a lot further, and you have a lot more of an opportunity to take yourself places rather than just relying on other people.
Yeah, I think a lot of times that's where people get hung up on, is they maybe interpret empowerment or enabling as charity. Is you're just giving, you're not it's going to continue the cycle because you're not really helping them. You're just giving them a few bucks or whatever, and it doesn't necessarily help them grow beyond their current situation. And I think that's what I really love about what Divine's doing, is how they have one, not taking advantage of the people. I think one of the worst, we live in a capitalistic society. I think commerce can do a lot of good. Case in point, Divine. But I think sometimes capitalism can really like breed the worst and greed and squashing. And I think a lot of that is often even taught to us, that a good business deal is when you walk away with everything and the other person walks away with nothing. There's the idea that it's a win-win situation isn't necessarily always instilled. So when I hear of all the things that the Divine's doing, I think it's a great example of how businesses can run and be sustainable. And it shows that sustainability isn't just necessarily in the environment, right? Sustainability can take on a lot of different meanings. And part of Divine's efforts are sustainable, fair trade. What does fair trade? We've touched on that a bit. What is fair trade?
Fair trade is an international system. There are different bodies that sort of can claim fair trade, but the one we operate under is called Fair Trade International. And it is a system that facilitates trade between producers and the people who rely on those products to make their businesses run. So,
Mm-hmm.
cocoa being the product and chocolate being the end product. So it's a system that sets up a lot of standards to ensure that producers are being appropriately remunerated for what they provide, as well as holding accountable the producer networks for creating environmentally sound and places to work, as well as labor rights, that sort of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of details that I can't get into on a short podcast, but it's simply a way to ensure that producers are able to make what they need, and that they're also being held accountable for their own actions and decisions as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what kind of environmental I guess, actions or environmental ways that you're doing to like nurture the environment in this situation? As I know farming can be hard on the environment, and transportation, adding the carbon into that. How are you guys offsetting or working within the environment, not to strip it?
I think we have a lot of room to grow in that area, and we, for the duration of our existence, have been trying to focus in on more of the labor side of things than environment. Not to say we haven't kept that in consideration, but as we move forward, I think that is where we need to really focus more of our efforts. In addition to moving forward and advancing gender equality, the environmental issue is not unrelated to that.
Yeah.
The thing to know is that Divine is a chocolate manufacturer, and we provide the business model and the way for farmers to earn a sustainable living wage. But the farmers themselves know a lot too, and they are, they're the masters of their craft, and so it's also up to them to understand how they can adapt best to the climate, and we can offer as much support as possible. But I would be wary of just saying, like, the company itself knows best about how to do farming better. No, farmers know. They know how to do what they do every day. But trying to find a way to genuinely support that and do it in a way, again, that is suited for the long term and not just short term fixes.
So I think, building on that, I know that you've done some efforts to reduce the amount of environmental impacts, like not using palm oil. How does that, like a small change like that, in a food product, actually have ripple effects into the environment?
Well, I think I don't know everything about how that decision came about, and I wish I knew a little bit more about all of the ramifications of using palm oil. But what I can say is that there's a status quo for a lot of things. And if the status quo is everybody's just using this one thing and they're not even considering what the impact is, then it's just going to continue to have a negative impact, as we know palm oil typically does. But I think it's sort of like companies have to understand that there will come a tipping point, and I think this is true in a lot of social justice environmental causes, is if you can just start small and you can be one person or one company that does something a little bit different, then that maybe can have, like you said, a ripple effect on others making that decision as well. So even if it's small, it still matters, because it demonstrates to others that, oh, things can be done a little bit differently. Maybe we should think about why that company made that decision, and maybe that can be something we can do too.
I think one of the big mysteries of chocolate, for at least for people, is what's it made of. We know there's cocoa, we know there's sugar. What else is in there?
So it depends on, it depends on the company. Every single company has its own, what we call couverture, which is a fancy name for like the specific recipe that company uses. So it's sort of, like if you're making a smoothie, you want it to be really tart, you might add a lot more lemon juice in it. So if we want the flavor of our chocolate bars to be, particularly creamy, we're adding more cocoa butter. So, I mean, lots of different types of chocolate companies will add in, vegetable oil substitutes to try and make it creamy. Divine Chocolate only uses 100% cocoa butter. There are, the things that everyone loves in their chocolate bars, like nuts or fruit or mint. It just depends on the bar itself. We could get into a whole other podcast about the process of making chocolate, but at Divine, we're really just focused in on, using natural ingredients, no artificial anything, non-GMO. So there's a lot that I could say in that answer, but I'll keep it short.
Do you think so? I think a lot of time with, at least in the wine world or in some of the other food spaces, there's always that tie to land, that tie of taste to the land. Do you think with the type of cocoa you're using, people are really getting a sense of place? They're tasting the sense of place through your chocolate.
I don't know if the everyday chocolate lover is that understands the nuances of flavor in that way. I think it's, like you said, similar to wine. You have people who really go all in on understanding the complexities of wine flavors, but then you have people who just enjoy glasses of wine because that's just what they like. So I think if in my role, I've been fortunate to try a lot of chocolate, not just our own, but many different companies. And I have observed and experienced different flavor profiles from different parts of the world. For example, I think a lot of the cocoa coming from South America has a little bit more of a fruitier, more tart taste, versus cocoa coming from West Africa is a little bit more of a balanced and earthy kind of flavor. So it's possible to experience that sort of nuance if you really go and try to sample them all at one time. I think that's the best way to understand the flavor differences.
So this kind of leads, I think, into like messaging and brand messaging, because everyone is always trying to differentiate themselves in a market space. And obviously, chocolate is no different than a lot of other, just very crowded.
Yeah.
And you definitely have a lot to work with as far as showing off how different your company is from others. But I think we talked about it a little bit earlier, but like purposeful marketing, I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what that means, or is constantly being defined and redefined. I know, like, the more I get into this podcast and talk with different businesses, my understanding of purposeful marketing changes, and my, I guess, awareness of what other brands are saying and not saying is becoming more apparent. So how are you seeing like purposeful marketing in your business, and what does that mean for you?
I think Divine is undergoing a really, we're dedicating a lot of time right now to understanding that ourselves. Because like you said, there are a lot of things that we can say. And I think that's been the hardest part about marketing Divine is, what do you say when you can say so much? And that message needs to be a little bit more streamlined to actually resonate with the everyday chocolate lover who wants to enjoy their chocolate bar, but also ensure that their purchase is doing something good in the world. I'm the type of person where, I can't say something that's not true. And so I'm very much like a stick to the rules type of person. And so everything that I put out and oversee has to be authentic. I will not let something go out that's not authentic to who we are and to what we do. And so I think that's a big part of it. We go by some of our values as a company to inform some of our purposeful messaging. So inclusion and independence, so freedom to do something. And really, at the end of the day, the other value is people, and really focusing in on, it's not just about being an ethical chocolate company for the sake of getting sales. It's really about understanding, where does this cocoa come from and who are the people that are making chocolate possible for everyone else. So my view is, it's important to understand where the consumer's head is at. I would love to think that everybody cares as much about all this stuff as me, but I know that that's not true. So rather than trying to write papers and papers and papers about why this is the best way to do things and you should totally understand this at the level that I do, it's really more about finding a way to be authentic, make a message that resonates with somebody where they are in their life, and help them feel connected to the people who are making chocolate possible for them to enjoy.
So how are you seeing this changing? I mean, just paying attention to the news in the last 4 months, it seems there's already a shift. Just more like corporate social responsibility programs. I think people are starting to, when I say people, I mean brands, marketing, people in brands are speaking to their customers or potential customers and trying to really show off how they are a part of this larger movement, whether it's for Black Lives Matter or environmental change, social equality. How do you see like brand positioning and messaging transforming over the next decade? I think we've gotten a glimpse of it, but really being authentic authenticity is definitely a buzzword right now, especially in the marketing world. But how do you see that actually like coming through for the next few years? And do you think people are going to start getting called out and held responsible? Because as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of just washing over of what they're really actually doing.
Yeah, I agree that calling out and being held accountable is really a critical part of it. And I would invite anybody to call Divine out if they thought something wasn't right either. And our goal would be to listen and understand and try and take action on that. But I think to your point, yeah, marketing is just that. It is positioning your company in a way that will make others see you in a particular way. So
Mm-hmm.
what I think is needed really is consumers and people who are, shelling out the money to buy products and whatnot, to take a deep dive into some of these companies and see what are the actions that are backing up those statements. And it's so easy to write, a social media post here, a social media post there. Anybody can pay someone to write pretty words and put it on a screen. But really what matters is a genuine understanding of how do you embed those values to make change happen into your business. That's what social enterprise is. It's not just after the fact, after we make our money, we'll give it back. It's how do we actually make change happen while we're doing what we do every day.
Mm-hmm. And I think that really leads into this next sort of little section before we wrap, and that's talking through leadership. And I think a lot of times we are when we work at businesses and our companies, we're at the mercy of leadership and how that company is being driven. Have you done activities or programs or anything to help nurture your own leadership? Any advice you have for younger people who are now going into jobs for the first time and they're disappointed with the way that their leadership is handling some of these things?
I have done a few trainings there. When I became a supervisor about 3 years ago, I wanted to learn a little bit more about how to manage and supervise direct reports. So I have done some things like that. I really take my best lessons from the people around me and the leaders I've had in my life. And, my family members included. I have a lot of women in my life who are incredible community leaders. So I would say leadership isn't learned in a classroom. And I think it also is a matter of just doing it and messing up and acknowledging what you haven't been able to do and what you want to do and how you will move on from that. I also would say that the key component to a good leader is empathy, and really nurturing and cultivating a sense of empathy is going to take anyone much, much further than they could otherwise. And sometimes, to your question about how do you work with people when you don't necessarily agree or are aligned with the leadership, is you just have to be really sometimes you can't change it, and that's something that anyone has to accept and either walk away from or persevere through. And it's just a matter of developing those individual attributes in yourself of how will you persevere if something is challenging. And that's where I think mission comes in sometimes it is worth continuing a challenging time because you care about the cause, because not everything is going to be perfect. I think that's the other thing I would say too, is the expectations need to be you need to be mindful about your expectations. There's no company, no organization that has perfect leadership. And rather than coming in and expecting everyone to sort of change around to your needs and your preferences, it's worth exploring how you as an individual contributor can be more flexible too, because you can learn from them even if it's not perfect.
I think it's beautiful what you just said, and empathy is something that I personally work on daily. It's something that I try to really be more aware of. I have found that, earlier in my career working as an independent photographer, it was very ego based for me. I went through a phase where it was very about my work and taking precedent. And as I evolved and grew, I started to realize that relationships, seeing things from other people's perspectives, creates one better work. Makes, I think, help find some happiness. And for me, like, I look to my mother. My mother has always been very empathetic. She's a nurse, one of the most caring people I know, and has really been my North Star for that. And I think as now I've become a business owner and we employ people, we work with different brands, we work with a variety of people of different talents. I think the one thing that really helps us come together at times is trying to consider what that other viewpoint is, and has I think some of the most impact for me personally, but I think can have like a lot of impact just towards humanity in general. You made a comment at one point in a previous interview that I read about leadership and being an introvert, and I definitely relate to that. As I tend to be an introvert at times. I think you see some of our great leaders in our life, like especially in the social justice space, they have these big, powerful speeches. They have no fear of standing up in front of and rallying huge groups of people. But for the introverts like us, that's a little intimidating. It takes a lot of energy. We have to spend a lot of time recharging after engaging with people. So for all the other introverts, and how have you navigated that with still being an effective leader and being successful that way?
It comes from a little bit of like retraining the people around you, to know that you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to have good ideas. So I think I think it's both what I do is, I can't be anybody else but myself, but I can try and understand how people perceive me and then work around that and adjust their expectations of me. And at the end of the day, what matters the most is the results that I can deliver. And if I'm trying to be, loud and outspoken, which sometimes I can be, I have that tendency sometimes, but at the end of the day, if I can demonstrate that I am competent and can move forward with the outcomes we hoped for, then it sort of speaks for itself. And that's what I try to do. I care very much about quality of work and quality of relationships. And so if I can stick to being, a person of integrity and accepting myself for who I am, which has, it's taken many years to get to even where I am right now. I think you don't need to explain yourself. You just be you and deliver what you can. And yeah, there's nothing else you can do beyond that. I can't change what people think.
Well, Liz, I appreciate your time today. I think you've said some really inspiring things and have helped, I think, frame the small things that we can do to help change things. I think a lot of times that's often the issue, or part of the issue, is how overwhelming it can feel, especially when you turn on the news and your city's burning and you don't know quite what to do. But in the end, I think case in point, these changes need to start personally and can build further into your professional life and I think and socially even. So thank you for talking through that today. We really appreciate it. I hope our listeners today found some inspiration and a nudge to help become better people as we all, seek to improve ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I agree. Everything you do is worth it, even if it's small, because I always say everything has to start somewhere. So you can make that start.
All right. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks.
Thank you guys for spending the last hour with us as we spoke with Liz Miller from Divine. I thought this conversation was packed with insights as she talked through how we can all support our own growth, support the growth of our loved ones and others around us. Going forward, if you have any suggestions for additional people that you'd like to hear from, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out at hi@weareunconquered.co and share any opinions, any suggestions, or you just want to say hi. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.